Judge fines woman for wearing a cross, only to discover she's a legal genius. Elena Moretti clutched her worn leather briefcase tighter as she approached the county courthouse steps. The small gold cross necklace her grandmother had given her decades ago hanging visibly around her neck. At 42, Elena's life had become a series of seemingly insurmountable challenges after being laid off from her Pargal position at a prestigious law firm 3 months ago, a casualty of corporate downsizing. She had been barely scraping by on unemployment while caring for her ailing mother, whose medical bills were mounting faster than Elena could manage. Today, she was representing herself in traffic court for a ticket she couldn't afford but knew was wrongfully issued. The fine might seem trivial to some, but to Elena it represented nearly a week's worth of groceries. She'd spent hours researching relevant traffic codes and precedents at the public library, determined not to let this additional financial burden crush her further. The courtroom was stuffy and overcrowded when Elena entered, finding a seat in the back row while she waited for her case to be called. Judge Raymond Harrow presided over the proceedings with a stern efficiency that bordered on impatience, known throughout the district for his strict interpretation of courtroom protocol and little tolerance for what he deemed time-wasting arguments. Judge Harlow had cultivated a reputation that intimidated even seasoned attorneys. Elena observed carefully as he briskly moved through the docket, noting how he interrupted defendants mid-sentence and imposed maximum fines with barely a glance at the evidence presented. Her anxiety mounted as she realized the uphill battle she faced, but she straightened her posture and reviewed her notes one final time. After waiting nearly 3 hours, the court clerk finally called her name as Elena approached the defendant's table. Judge Harlow glanced up from his papers, his gaze immediately fixing on the gold cross hanging from her neck. His expression hardened noticeably. More, Eddie, we maintain a secular cardum here. That religious symbol needs to be tucked away or removed before we proceed. Elena's hand instinctively went to her grandmother's cross, a cherished keepsake she had worn every day since her grandmother's passing 15 years ago. She respectfully explained the personal significance of a necklace and politely noted she wasn't aware of any court rule prohibiting religious jewelry. The judge's face flushed with irritation as he repeated his demand more firmly, adding that he would hold her in contempt and impose a $250 fine if she didn't comply. Immediately, the courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned toward Elena, standing her ground with quiet dignity. Elena asked if she could please see the specific court rule that prohibited religious symbols in the courtroom. Judge Harrow's temper flared visibly as he interpreted her question as defiance rather than a legitimate inquiry. Without providing the requested citation, he immediately declared her in contempt of court, imposed the threatened $250 fine, and ordered her to remove the necklace or be escorted from the premises. Fighting back tears of frustration and embarrassment, Elena carefully removed her grandmother's cross and placed it in her pocket, the weight of this additional financial penalty threatening to break her. The traffic violation hearing proceeded quickly after that, with Judge Harlow seemingly determined to make an example of her, barely glancing at the evidence she had meticulously prepared before upholding the original ticket and adding court costs as Elena gathered her documents, preparing to leave the courtroom with both her spirit and bank account significantly diminished. An older gentleman in a tailored suit approached her. He introduced himself as Martin Goldstein, a retired attorney who had been observing the proceedings while waiting for his grandson's case. Speaking in hushed tones, he informed Elena that Judge Harrow's demand and subsequent fine were clear violations of her First Amendment rights, as federal courts had consistently upheld the right to wear religious symbols in courtrooms. Mr. Goldstein handed her his card suggesting she might have grounds for a formal complaint to the Judicial Conduct Board. Elena thanked him politely, though she doubted she had the energy or resources to pursue such an action against a powerful county judge. Nevertheless, she tucked his card into her wallet, alongside the receipt for her fines, totaling nearly $500 money. She simply didn't have that evening. Unable to sleep and troubled by the day's events, Elena found herself diving deep into legal research online. Her Pargal training, combined with a natural aptitude for legal analysis that had made her an invaluable asset at her former firm, guided her through statute after statute, case after case. By dawn, she had compiled a comprehensive brief citing Supreme Court precedent protecting religious expression, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and numerous judicial conduct violations committed by Judge Harlow. Despite her exhaustion, Elena felt a spark of her old confidence returning. She spent the next 2 days refining her argument, proofreading her citations, and finally submitting a formal complaint to the state's Judicial Conduct Board, with copies sent to the county court administrator and the local bar association. Given her financial situation, she couldn't afford an attorney, but her Pargal background had equipped her with enough knowledge to represent herself competently. 3 weeks passed with no response, and Elena had nearly given up hope when she received a certified letter informing her that her complaint had been reviewed and found to have sufficient merit to warrant a full hearing. The letter further stated that her contempt fine had been stayed pending investigation. While this provided temporary financial relief, Elena knew that standing up to Judge Harlow could potentially make her a target in the small legal community where she had been seeking employment. Despite this concern, she spent every spare moment between job applications and caring for her mother, preparing for the hearing, our relevant cases, and practicing her oral arguments. The meticulous attention to detail and analytical skills that had made her an exceptional Pargal now served her personal cause. The hearing before the Judicial Conduct Board was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in the state capitol. Elena could barely afford the gas to make the 2-hour drive, but she arrived early, dressed in her only suitable outfit, a navy blue suit she'd worn to countless job interviews in recent months. As she entered the hearing room, she was surprised to find it unusually crowded. Legal professionals, court staff, and even a few journalists filled the seats. Judge Harlow sat at one table with his attorney, a high-profile lawyer from a prestigious firm in the capital. Elena took her place at the other table alone, but composed, her grandmother's cross once again hanging visibly around her neck. The head of the Conduct Board, Justice Eliza Washington, a respected retired Supreme Court justice known for her fair-mindedness, called the proceedings to order. What unfolded over the next 3 hours stunned everyone in attendance. Elena presented her case with the precision and eloquence of a seasoned constitutional lawyer. She systematically laid out 14 separate federal precedents protecting religious expression in public settings, including courtrooms. She cited the specific Judicial Conduct Rules 6.6, aided by Judge Harrow's arbitrary enforcement of a non-existent dress code policy. Most damaging was her presentation of statistical evidence she had painstakingly compiled, showing a pattern of Judge Harlow imposing harsher penalties on defendants displaying religious symbols associated with minority faiths while ignoring comparable Christian displays. The room fell silent as Ina concluded by respectfully requesting not only the dismissal of her contempt charge and refund of her fine, but also mandatory religious freedom training for the judge and a formal review of his past rulings for similar violations. Judge Harrow's Attorney attempted to paint Elena as an opportunistic troublemaker seeking attention, but his arguments fell flat against her meticulously documented case. When Justice Washington asked Elena where she had received her law degree, the courtroom held its breath as she explained that she held no law degree at all. She was a pargal by training who had simply researched the law, as any citizen has the right to do. A murmur of amazement rippled through the audience. During a brief recess, Elena overheard whispers about her performance, with one attorney commenting that he'd seen fewer compelling arguments from partners of his firm with 30 years of experience. Justice Washington reconvened the hearing to announce that the board would need time to deliberate, but in the interim, Elena's contempt fine was immediately vacated and would be funded within 7 business days. The following morning, Elena's phone began ringing at 7:30 a.m. The first call came from a local news station requesting an interview about her confrontation with Judge Harlow. By noon, she had received calls from 3 more news outlets, 2 legal blogs, and a prominent civil liberties organization interested in featuring her story. Most surprisingly, she received a call from Catherine Zhang, the managing partner of Zhang and Associates, one of the most respected civil rights firms in the state. Miss Zhang had been in attendance at the hearing and was impressed not only by Elena's legal acumen, but by her poise and principles. She wanted to discuss a potential position at the firm, not as a pargal, but in their newly created litigation specialist track for talented individuals without formal law degrees, but with exceptional aptitude for legal analysis. Within a week, the Judicial Conduct Board issued its ruling, finding that Judge Harlow had indeed violated Elena's constitutional rights and abused his judicial authority. The board ordered him to complete 40 hours of religious freedom training, issued a formal reprimand, and initiated a review of his past cases for similar misconduct. The story made headlines across the state, with Elena reluctantly emerging as the face of religious freedom in the courts. More importantly for Elena, she accepted the position at Zhang and Associates, which came with a salary sufficient to cover her mother's medical bills and provide them both with stability. For the first time in months, the firm even offered flexible scheduling to accommodate her caregiving responsibilities. 6 months later, Elena sat in the back of a packed law school auditorium listening as Dean Richard Montgomery of State University Law School discussed her case, now titled Moore Eddy versus Judicial District 7, which had become required reading for first constitutional law students. The dean explained how else self-representation had changed judicial training protocols across the state and led to a formal clarification of religious expression rights in courtrooms nationwide. After the lecture, Dean Montgomery approached Elena, introducing himself and offering her something she had never thought possible: a scholarship to attend law school part-time while maintaining her position at Zhang and Associates. The firm had agreed to adjust her schedule and provide tuition assistance, recognizing in the exceptional talent they had discovered in the most unlikely of circumstances. Today, 3 years later, Elena Moore EDI is in her 2nd year of law school, maintaining a position on the low view while working at Zhang and Associates, where she has already contributed to winning 3 significant religious freedom cases. Her mother's health has stabilized thanks to the specialist care. She can now afford the gold cross necklace from her grandmother, remains a constant around her neck, now a symbol not just of faith and family, but of the unexpected journey that transformed her life. Judge Harlow, following multiple similar complaints that emerged after Elena's case, opted for early retirement rather than face further scrutiny of his conduct. Elena occasionally receives letters from people facing similar religious discrimination seeking her advice. She answers, each one remembering how close she came to simply paying the unjust fine and walking away looking bad. Elena often reflects on how a moment of injustice became the catalyst for discovering her true calling. What began as a simple traffic ticket and a judge's intolerance had revealed capabilities within herself she had never fully recognized. As she prepares for graduation and the bar exam, Elena has already accepted a position to head Jang and Associates' new religious freedom litigation department upon completion of her degree. Her story is frequently recounted in legal ethics classes as an example of how justice often requires ordinary people to stand up against powerful institutions. Elena's grandmother had always told her that her cross would protect her in times of trouble. She could never have imagined just how prophetic those words would prove to be, nor how a small gold cross would ultimately redirect the course of not only Elena's life, but of religious expression jurisprudence throughout the state.